The alarm bell screamed through the corridors of the USS Defiance as Captain Jake Morrison rushed to the bridge. His coffee cup shattered on the floor as the ship shook from an unknown energy pulse. 23 years of military service had never prepared him for what appeared on the main screen. Massive ships hung in space near Jupiter like floating cities made of crystal and metal. Each vessel stretched for miles, their surfaces gleaming with lights that pulsed in patterns no human had ever seen. The alien fleet had appeared from nowhere, materializing as if they had torn holes in space itself. "How many ships, Lieutenant?" Morrison asked, his voice steady despite the fear crawling up his spine. 67 confirmed contacts, sir. Each one is at least 10 times larger than our biggest battleship," replied Lieutenant Danny Cooper, his hands shaking as he worked. "The sensor controls. Sir, they're scanning us. Every ship in our patrol group is being examined." Morrison gripped the armrests of his command chair. The Earth Defense Fleet had 12 ships in this sector. Against 67 alien vessels, they might as well be throwing rocks at mountains. He opened communications to Earth immediately. "Command, this is Morrison. We have contact with unknown alien forces. They are hostile in nature and vastly superior in numbers, requesting immediate backup and instructions." The response came from Admiral Kate Turner herself, her voice crackling through the static. "Hold position, Captain. Do not fire unless fired upon. We're scrambling everything we have, but you're our eyes and ears until we get there." Before Morrison could respond, every screen on the ship flickered and changed. The alien ships had taken control of their communication systems without effort. A face appeared on the main display, unlike anything in human experience. The creature had 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern, skin that looked like polished stone, and a mouth that opened sideways instead of up and down. "I am Admiral Crixtal of the Zephyrian Empire," the alien spoke in perfect English, though its voice sounded like grinding metal. "You will surrender your world and join our empire, or we will destroy every living thing on your planet. You have 3 of your days to decide." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Morrison felt the weight of 6 billion human lives pressing down on his shoulders. He had fought in border skirmishes and pirate raids, but this was different. This was the survival of his entire species. On Earth, President Lisa Hamilton sat in the emergency bunker beneath the White House, surrounded by her top military advisors. The Situation Room had been designed for nuclear war, but no one had planned for alien invasion. Maps and screens showed the alien fleet positions while frantic reports came in from observatories around the world. "What do we know about their capabilities?" Hamilton asked, her face pale but determined. General Pete Collins spread out the intelligence reports on the table. "Their ships use technology we don't understand. They appeared without warning, which means they have faster-than-light travel that we can't detect. Their vessels are massive, and preliminary scans suggest armor and shielding far beyond our current weapons." Hamilton looked around the room at faces filled with fear and uncertainty. "Options? We could launch everything we have," suggested General Mary Foster, commander of the orbital defense platforms. "Hit them with nuclear weapons before they expect it." "And if that doesn't work?" Hamilton asked. The silence that followed answered her question. If humanity's most powerful weapons failed, there would be no second chance. Admiral Turner leaned forward. "Madam President, I request 72 hours. Let me show them what humans are capable of before we consider surrender." Collins shook his head. "Kate, we've seen their ships. Our entire fleet couldn't scratch the paint on one of those vessels." "I'm not talking about our ships," Turner replied, her eyes hard as steel. "I'm talking about our history. These aliens think we're a primitive species that will roll over when faced with superior force. Maybe it's time they learned what humans do when someone threatens our home." Hamilton considered the proposal. 3 days wasn't much time, but it was better than immediate destruction. "What exactly are you planning, Admiral?" "I want to show them who we are," Turner said. "Every war we've fought, every battle we've won and lost, every time humans have faced impossible odds and kept fighting anyway. If they're going to conquer us, they should know exactly what they're getting into." President Hamilton made the decision that would change the course of human history. "Do it," Send the message to their admiral. Tell him we request the full 3 days to prepare our response. The message was transmitted to the alien fleet within the hour. Admiral Krixtall received it aboard his flagship, a vessel called the Eternal Victory that had conquered 47 worlds without taking significant damage. He found the human request curious. Most species either surrendered immediately or launched desperate attacks that were quickly crushed. They want time to prepare, reported his second-in-command, war strategist Vexnor. Perhaps they plan to evacuate their leaders or hide their resources. Krixtall studied the primitive human ship still hovering near Jupiter. Their technology was centuries behind Zephyrian standards, yet something about their response intrigued him. Grant their request. Use the time to study their military capabilities. I want to understand this species before we add them to the Empire. You believe they might resist the occupation? Vexnor asked. Every species resists at first, Krixtall replied. But some resist longer than others. The ones that fight hardest often make the best soldiers once they accept their place in the Empire. Neither the Admiral nor his strategist realized they were about to discover something that would terrify the Zephyrian Empire to its core. They were about to learn that humans were not like other species. They were about to discover that some fights are more costly than the prize they seek to win. Back on Earth, Admiral Turner was already assembling her team. Commander Lisa Park, the military's chief historian, Dr. Alex Stone, an expert in human conflict studies, and Lieutenant Commander Ryan Bell, a specialist in psychological warfare. Their mission seemed impossible. Convince an alien empire that conquering Earth would cost more than it was worth. We have 72 hours to save our species, Turner told them. Not with weapons or shields, but with the truth about who we are and what we've done to each other for thousands of years. The countdown had begun, and humanity's fate would be decided not on a battlefield, but in a conference room where the galaxy's most advanced military minds would watch recordings of humanity's bloodiest moments and decide whether Earth was worth the price of conquest. Commander Lisa Park had not slept in 36 hours. Her team worked around the clock in the underground archives beneath the Pentagon, pulling together thousands of years of human warfare into a presentation that might save their species. Coffee cups and empty food containers covered every surface as historians, military analysts, and computer specialists raced against time. We need to start with something that shows human determination, Dr. Alex Stone said, scrolling through battle footage on his screen. Something that demonstrates we don't give up when the odds are against us. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Bell looked up from his computer. What about Thermopylae? 300 Spartans holding off an entire Persian army? Park shook her head. Too ancient. They'll think we've changed since then. We need to show them recent conflicts, but we also need to show them how we got to this point. The main screen in the archive room displayed a timeline of human conflicts stretching back 5,000 years. Red markers indicated major battles, and there were so many red dots that sections of the timeline looked like solid lines of blood. Look at this, Stone said, pointing at the screen. We've been at war for 93% of recorded history. Most species fight for resources or territory. We fight for ideas, for revenge, for honor. Sometimes we fight just because someone else started fighting. Bell pulled up casualty statistics from the 20th century alone. World War I killed 17 million people. World War II killed 75 million. The weird thing is, we got better at killing each other, but we also got better at refusing to quit. Park made a decision that would shape their presentation. We start with ancient warfare and work forward, show them the progression. Let them see how we've always been this way, but we've gotten more dangerous over time. The team worked through the night, creating a multimedia presentation that would horrify any civilized species. They included battle footage, historical records, casualty reports, and most importantly, examples of human forces that kept fighting long after any rational species would have surrendered. Meanwhile, aboard the Zephyrian flagship, Admiral Krixtall prepared his own team to study the human military data. War strategist Vexnor assembled the Empire's best military analysts, including strategic mind Korthak and battle coordinator Yindal. They had studied the military capabilities of 847 conquered species, None had ever required more than a few days of analysis. "What do we know about human military organization?" Krikstal asked his team. Vexnor consulted his reports. "They have multiple nations that fight each other regularly. Their technology is primitive but functional. They use chemical explosives, metal projectiles, and basic energy weapons. Their largest military units appear to be called armies and contain roughly 100,000 individuals. Standard tribal warfare," noted Korthak. "We've seen this pattern before. They'll unite against us temporarily, then return to fighting each other once we establish control." The first day of presentations began with Captain Jake Morrison serving as the primary human contact. He stood in the communications room of the USS Defiance, knowing that his words were being transmitted to an alien species that could destroy his world with a thought. "Admiral Krikstal, we're ready to begin the presentation about human military capabilities," Morrison said. "Commander Park will provide historical context, and Dr. Stone will explain the significance of what you're seeing." The aliens had provided translation technology that made communication possible, though Morrison still felt strange talking to creatures that looked like living rocks with too many eyes. Park began with the earliest recorded human conflicts. "This is the Battle of Kadesh, fought between Egyptian and Hittite forces over 3,000 years ago. Notice that both sides used bronze weapons and horse-drawn chariots. The battle lasted for days with neither side willing to retreat." The Zephyrian analysts watched with mild interest. Primitive warfare was common among young species. They had seen thousands of similar conflicts on worlds across the galaxy. "This is the Siege of Troy," Park continued. "Human forces surrounded this city for 10 years. 10 years of constant warfare over the capture of one woman. They could have simply found another woman, but humans don't think that way." Vexnor made a note in his report. "Irrational motivations for conflict. Species shows signs of emotional decision-making in military matters." The presentation moved forward through time. Roman legions marching across Europe, medieval knights charging into battle, Mongol horsemen conquering half the known world. Each example showed humans fighting with increasing sophistication, but also with the same relentless determination that had marked their earliest conflicts. "The Crusades lasted for nearly 200 years, Dr. Stone explained. Europeans traveled thousands of miles to fight in foreign lands for religious reasons. They suffered massive casualties, disease, starvation, and defeat. Yet they kept sending new armies." Strategic mind Korthak began to feel uneasy. Most species fought for practical reasons: food, territory, mates, or resources. These humans seemed to fight for abstract concepts that had no material value. The presentation reached the gunpowder age, and the Zephyrian observers saw their first glimpse of what would eventually terrify them. The Battle of Gettysburg appeared on their screens, showing 50,000 human casualties in 3 days of fighting over a small Pennsylvania town that had no strategic value. "Both sides knew the battle was pointless," Bell explained. "The Confederate Army was trying to invade the North, but this town wasn't their real objective. The Union Army was trying to stop them, but they could have simply retreated to better defensive positions. Instead, they fought for 3 days because neither side would give up ground." Battle coordinator Yindal studied the casualty reports with growing confusion. "They lost more soldiers in 3 days than most species lose in entire wars. Why didn't they retreat?" Morrison answered the question with words that would haunt the Zephyrian High Command. "Because we don't retreat when we're fighting for our homes. We'd rather die than let someone else win." The presentation continued into the Industrial Age, showing the American Civil War, the Franco-Prussian War, and dozens of other conflicts where humans had used increasingly deadly technology against each other. The aliens watched humans fight with rifles, artillery, and early machine guns, creating battlefields covered with bodies. "The Battle of the Somme," Park announced as new footage appeared. "First day casualties: 60,000 British soldiers, killed or wounded. The battle continued for 4 more months." "Why?" Vexnor asked, his voice tight with confusion. "Why continue a battle that was clearly unwinnable?" Dr. Stone answered with the simple truth that would change everything. Because the alternative was giving up. Humans don't give up. We never have. The first day of presentations ended with World War I, showing trench warfare where millions of humans died fighting over a few miles of muddy ground. The Zephyrian analysts retired to their quarters, deeply disturbed by what they had witnessed. "These humans are insane," Korthak reported to Admiral Krikstal. "They fight battles that cannot be won, for reasons that make no sense, and they continue. Fighting long after victory becomes impossible." Krikstal studied the reports, feeling the first stirrings of doubt about the invasion. "What happens tomorrow?" "They're showing us their 20th and 21st century conflicts," Vexnor replied. "According to their data, the wars get bigger and the weapons get deadlier." The Admiral looked out at the small blue planet that hung in space like a jewel. Tomorrow, he would learn just how dangerous humans could become when they decided that death was preferable to surrender. Tomorrow, the Zephyrian Empire would discover that some species were too costly to conquer. The second day of presentations began with footage that would shatter the Zephyrian Empire's understanding of warfare. Admiral Krikstal sat in his command chamber surrounded by his top military minds, all of them still disturbed by what they had seen the previous day. None of them were prepared for what humans called World War II. Commander Park stood before the communication screen, her face drawn from exhaustion but her voice steady. "What you saw yesterday was just the beginning. In the 20th century, humans developed industrial warfare. We learned to kill each other on a scale that had never existed before. The first images showed the invasion of Poland in 1939. Tanks rolled across fields while aircraft dropped bombs on cities. To the Zephyrian observers, it looked like standard planetary conquest tactics, though the technology was primitive. This war lasted 6 years, Dr. Stone explained. It involved every major nation on Earth. By the end, 75 million humans were dead. That's more than the total population of most worlds we've encountered." War strategist Vexnor made rapid calculations. "They killed roughly 1% of their entire species in a single conflict?" "Yes," Lieutenant Commander Bell replied, "and they kept fighting anyway." The presentation moved to the Eastern Front, showing the German invasion of the Soviet Union. The Zephyrian analysts watched millions of human soldiers marching across frozen wastelands, fighting in conditions that would kill most species within hours. "The siege of Leningrad lasted 872 days, Park announced. The city was surrounded and cut off from all supplies. People ate leather, glue, and sawdust to survive. Over 1 million civilians died from starvation and cold." Strategic mind Korthak studied the casualty reports with growing horror. Why didn't they surrender? The city had no strategic value if everyone was dead. Captain Morrison's voice came through the communication link, cold and matter-of-fact. Because surrendering meant letting the enemy win. The people of Leningrad chose to die rather than give up their city. The footage showed children as young as 10 years old working in factories, making ammunition and weapons while bombs fell around them. It showed civilians digging anti-tank ditches with their bare hands in the middle of winter. It showed a species that had turned every member of their society into a weapon of war. "Here's something that might interest you," Bell said, pulling up new footage. "The Battle of Stalingrad. The Germans captured most of the city, but the Soviets refused to retreat. They fought for every building, every room, every staircase. The aliens watched human soldiers fighting in the ruins of their own civilization. Snipers hiding in bombed-out schools, soldiers throwing grenades across apartment hallways, civilians making weapons in basement factories while artillery shells exploded overhead. The battle lasted 5 months," Stone continued. "Both sides lost over 2 million soldiers. The city was completely destroyed. There was nothing left worth capturing, but neither side would stop fighting." Battle coordinator Yindal was trembling as she watched the footage. "They destroyed their own city rather than let their enemies have it. That's called scorched earth tactics," Morrison replied. "If we can't keep something, we make sure our enemies can't use it either. We'll burn our own farms, blow up our own bridges, and poison our own wells, rather than let an invader benefit from them." The presentation moved to the Pacific Theater, and the Zephyrian observers saw something that would haunt their dreams for years to come. The Battle of Iwo Jima appeared on their screens, showing a tiny volcanic island that had no resources and no strategic value. "This island is 8 square miles," Park explained. The Japanese had 22,000 defenders. The Americans attacked with 70,000 troops. The battle lasted 36 days. The footage showed human soldiers using flamethrowers to clear caves and bunkers. It showed Japanese defenders who had prepared elaborate tunnel systems and were willing to fight to the death for every yard of black sand and volcanic rock. "The Japanese knew they couldn't win," Bell continued. "They had no air support, no naval support, and no hope of reinforcement. Their plan wasn't to win. Their plan was to kill as many Americans as possible before they died." Admiral Kriegstall felt something he had never experienced in 3 centuries of conquest: genuine fear. "How many casualties?" 28,000 Americans killed or wounded, 21,000 Japanese killed. Only 216 Japanese soldiers surrendered, and most of those were unconscious from wounds. The numbers hit the Zephyrian command like physical blows. They had conquered entire star systems with fewer casualties than humans inflicted on each other, fighting over a worthless piece of rock. "Why?" Vexnor asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Why fight so hard for something so worthless?" Dr. Stone answered with words that would echo through Zephyrian military academies for generations. "Because it wasn't about the island. It was about proving that you couldn't make us quit. Every Japanese soldier who died on that island was sending a message to the Americans. This is what it will cost you to invade our homeland." The presentation continued with footage from Vietnam, showing how a technologically superior American military had been worn down by an enemy that refused to fight conventional battles. The Zephyrians watched in growing horror as they saw how humans adapted their tactics when facing superior force. "Guerrilla warfare," Morrison explained. "When we can't fight you directly, we hide in jungles, mountains, and cities. We attack your supply lines, ambush your patrols, and make every day of occupation cost you soldiers and resources." The aliens saw footage of Vietnamese fighters living in underground tunnel systems for years, surviving on handfuls of rice, while launching attacks against one of the most powerful militaries on Earth. They saw how humans could disappear into their own populations, making every civilian a potential threat. "The Americans had better weapons, better technology, and more soldiers," Bell said. "But the Vietnamese were fighting for their homeland, and they were willing to fight for as long as it took." Strategic mind Korthak was making frantic calculations. If humans will fight this hard against each other, what would they do against an alien invasion? The question hung in the air like poison gas. The Zephyrian analysts were beginning to understand that they weren't looking at the military capabilities of a primitive species. They were looking at a race of beings who had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of war, not just against their enemies, but against impossible odds. "There's more," Park said quietly. "We haven't shown you urban warfare yet. We haven't shown you what happens when humans fight in their own cities, with their own families at stake." The footage shifted to modern conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan, showing how humans fought in dense urban environments where every building could hide an enemy, where every street corner could conceal a bomb, where the population itself became part of the battlefield. "Notice something about all these conflicts," Morrison said. "The humans with better technology don't always win. The humans who refuse to give up usually do." As the second day of presentations ended, Admiral Kriegstall dismissed his staff and sat alone in his command chamber, staring out at the small blue world that had seemed like such an easy conquest just 2 days ago. For the first time in his military career, the Admiral was beginning to wonder if there were some worlds that weren't worth conquering, some species that would cost more to defeat than they were worth as subjects of the Empire. Tomorrow, the humans would show them their most recent conflicts, and Kriegstall suspected that the worst revelations were yet to come. Strategic mind Korthak had not slept since the presentations began. His quarters aboard the Zephyrian flagship were filled with data screens, mathematical projections, and casualty estimates that grew more terrifying with each calculation. Empire's most brilliant military analyst was trying to solve an impossible equation. How do you conquer a species that refuses to be conquered? Admiral Kriegstall entered the analysis chamber where his top strategists had been working for 18 hours straight. The room buzzed with nervous energy as dozens of Zephyrian military experts tried to make sense of human warfare patterns. "Report," Kriegstall commanded, though he dreaded the answer. Battle Coordinator Yindal looked up from her screens, her 4 eyes dim with exhaustion. "Admiral, we've run every scenario we can imagine. The mathematical models all point to the same conclusion, which is, conquering Earth would be the costliest military operation in the history of the Zephyrian Empire, possibly too costly to justify." Korthak activated his main display, showing invasion projections based on human military data. "We've analyzed their response patterns from over 3,000 historical battles. Humans do not surrender when facing superior force. They adapt their tactics and continue fighting." The display showed Earth's major population centers, each one marked with estimated resistance duration. The numbers were staggering. New York, 18 months of urban warfare. London, 24 months. Tokyo, 36 months. Each estimate assumed the use of massive Zephyrian military force and the complete destruction of the cities themselves. "These projections assume we would need to clear every building, every tunnel, every basement," Yindal explained. "Based on human historical patterns, they would turn their own cities into death traps rather than surrender them intact." Bexnor pulled up footage from recent human conflicts. "Look at this battle in a city called Stalingrad. The humans fought for individual rooms. They would blow up apartment buildings rather than let their enemies use them for cover. They turned their own hospitals and schools into fortresses." The analysis got worse as they dug deeper into human military history. The Zephyrians had discovered something called asymmetric warfare, where weaker human forces had defeated stronger ones through sheer persistence and willingness to absorb casualties. In Afghanistan, a technologically advanced human military fought local fighters for 20 years, Korthak reported. The local humans had no aircraft, no satellites, no advanced weapons. They hid in caves and mountains, launched hit-and-run attacks, and waited for their enemies to get tired of fighting. "What was the result?" Kriegstall asked. "The advanced military eventually gave up and left. They had better weapons and more soldiers, but the local humans were willing to fight longer." The third day of human presentations began with footage that made the previous revelations seem tame. Commander Park introduced the topic that would seal humanity's fate as a species too dangerous to conquer. "Today we're going to show you urban warfare and what humans call insurgency," she announced. "This is what happens when we fight in our own cities with our own families at stake." The first footage came from a human conflict in Iraq, showing how a few thousand insurgent fighters had tied down over 100,000 occupying troops for years. The Zephyrian observers watched humans hiding weapons in schools, mosques, and hospitals. They saw how human civilians could appear peaceful during the day and become fighters at night. "Every human civilian is a potential combatant," Dr. Stone explained. "We don't have separate military and civilian populations like most species. When our homes are threatened, everyone becomes a soldier." Lieutenant Commander Bell showed them footage from urban battles where humans had fought room by room through their own cities. "This is the Battle of Fallujah. American forces had to clear the city building by building. The defenders had spent months preparing booby traps, hidden weapons, and escape tunnels. The aliens watched human soldiers checking every room, every closet, every basement for enemies. They saw how a single sniper could pin down an entire unit for hours. They watched humans use their own infrastructure against invaders, turning streets into killing zones and buildings into fortresses. Notice how long it takes, Morrison said through the communication link. Months to clear a single city, and that's with humans fighting other humans who think similarly. Against an alien invasion, we would have the advantage of knowing our own territory better than you do. Captain Morrison pulled up intelligence reports that made the Zephyrian blood run cold. We've been preparing for alien invasion scenarios since the 1940s. Every major city on Earth has emergency plans, hidden supply caches, and designated resistance leaders. We've spent decades planning for exactly this situation. War strategist. Vexnor studied the human preparations with growing horror. They have been planning to fight alien invaders for almost a century. Yes, Bell replied. We call it civil defense. Every schoolchild learns what to do if Earth is invaded. Hide food and weapons. Sabotage enemy supply lines. Never surrender. Never give up. The presentation showed human resistance movements from World War II, demonstrating how occupied populations had made life impossible for their conquerors. French resistance fighters blowing up train tracks, Polish fighters attacking German patrols, Yugoslav partisans hiding in mountains and forests for years. The humans fighting these resistance movements spoke the same languages, looked the same, and came from the same planet, Park explained. Against alien invaders, every human would know instantly who the enemy was. There would be no confusion, no collaboration, no divided loyalties. Strategic mind Korthak was running real-time calculations as the presentation continued. Admiral, if we invaded Earth, we would need to occupy over 200 major cities simultaneously. Each city would require constant military presence to prevent uprising. The garrison forces alone would tie up our entire fleet. But the worst revelation was yet to come. Dr. Stone introduced a concept that would give Zephyrian strategists nightmares. For generations, mutually assured destruction. Humans have nuclear weapons, Stone announced. Over 13,000 nuclear warheads spread across multiple nations. If we believed our species was facing extinction, we would use them all. The aliens watched footage of nuclear weapons tests, seeing the massive explosions that could destroy entire cities in seconds. They learned about human nuclear doctrine, the policy of launching everything if defeat became certain. You would destroy your own planet rather than let us have it? Yindal asked, her voice shaking. Morrison answered with chilling certainty. If humanity was going to die anyway, we would make sure Earth was worthless to you. Scorched Earth tactics on a planetary scale. Admiral Krixtal felt the weight of 3 centuries of military tradition crashing down around him. The Zephyrian Empire had conquered nearly 1,000 worlds, but they had never encountered a species that would choose mutual annihilation over surrender. Korthak presented his final analysis to the assembled command staff. Based on human historical patterns, an invasion of Earth would require the following: complete orbital bombardment of all major cities, ground forces numbering in the tens of millions, occupation lasting several centuries, and acceptable losses of up to 60% of our invasion fleet. 60%? Krixtal repeated, stunned. That assumes the humans don't use nuclear weapons against our ground forces, Korthak replied. If they do, our casualties could approach 90%. The analysis chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The Zephyrian Empire would win the war against Earth, but the cost would cripple them for generations. They would rule over a radioactive wasteland populated by billions of humans who would never stop fighting. There's one more thing, Vexnor said quietly. The humans have been united against us for only 3 days. Imagine what they could accomplish if they had months or years to prepare. Admiral Krixtal stared at the tactical displays showing Earth's defenses. For the first time in his long military career, he was looking at a world that might not be worth conquering. The humans had shown them something the Zephyrian Empire had never encountered before. A species that would rather destroy everything than surrender anything. As the 3rd day of presentations ended, Krixtal made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. Tomorrow, he would not watch more human battle footage. Tomorrow, he would open peace negotiations with the most dangerous species the galaxy had ever produced. The emergency session of the Zephyrian High Command convened at dawn on the 4th day. Admiral Krixtal stood before the holographic images of the 12 species that ruled the Empire, their alien faces displaying confusion and concern. Never before had a conquest been delayed for detailed analysis of the target species. Explain your delay, Admiral, commanded Supreme Leader Morgath, whose crystalline form pulsed with impatience. One primitive world should not require 4 days of planning. Krixtal activated the display screens around the chamber, showing the mathematical projections his strategists had compiled. Supreme Leader, this species is unlike any we have encountered. I recommend we reconsider our approach to Earth. Reconsider. The voice belonged to War Master Zektoth, whose 6 arms gestured in disbelief. You command the greatest fleet in galactic history. Surely one small world cannot resist our might. The issue is not whether we can defeat them, Krixtal replied. The issue is the cost of victory. Strategic mind Korthak presented the invasion analysis that had kept him awake for 3 straight days. Honored leaders, human resistance patterns indicate a conquest requiring 80% of our total military forces, occupation lasting 3 centuries, and acceptable losses exceeding half our fleet. The silence that followed was broken by nervous chittering from the insectoid representative. Half our fleet for one world? The humans have been preparing for alien invasion for decades, Battle Coordinator Yindal explained. They have hidden weapons, underground facilities, and detailed plans for resistance warfare. More importantly, they have nuclear weapons and have stated they will use them if facing extinction. War strategist Vexnor added the final element that would change galactic history. Based on their military history, humans prefer death to surrender. They will fight until every last individual is dead rather than accept occupation. Meanwhile, on Earth, President Lisa Hamilton sat in the Situation Room surrounded by her advisors. The past 3 days had been the longest of her life, watching humanity's fate decided by alien beings, studying footage of human wars. Any word from the fleet? She asked Admiral Turner. Captain Morrison reports the aliens have been silent for 12 hours, Turner replied. Their ships are maintaining position, but they're not responding to communication attempts. General Pete Collins studied the latest intelligence reports. Our satellites show increased activity aboard their flagship. Multiple ships have been sending data streams to what appears to be their command vessel. They're making a decision, Hamilton said. The question is what that decision will be. Dr. Alex Stone, who had spent 3 days compiling humanity's most violent moments, looked exhausted but determined. Madam President, we showed them everything. Every war, every battle, every example of human refusal to surrender. If this doesn't work, nothing will. Commander Lisa Park nodded in agreement. We gave them a complete picture of what they would face. Not just our military capabilities, but our psychology. They know now that conquering Earth would be the costliest war in their empire's history. The communication system suddenly activated, showing Admiral Krixtal's alien features on the main screen. His 4 eyes seemed different now, lacking the confidence they had displayed 4 days earlier. President Hamilton, the alien admiral began, his voice carrying a weight that had not been there before. The Zephyrian High Command has completed our analysis of human military capabilities. Hamilton felt her heart stop. This was the moment that would determine whether humanity lived or died as a free species. We have concluded, Krixtal continued, that direct conquest of Earth would violate our principles of efficient expansion. The cost in Zephyrian lives and resources would exceed the value of your world to our empire. The Situation Room erupted in barely controlled celebration, but Hamilton raised her hand for silence. What exactly are you proposing, Admiral? The Zephyrian Empire wishes to offer humanity a different arrangement. We propose membership in our coalition as equals rather than subjects. Your species would maintain control over your home system, while contributing to our mutual defense and expansion. Captain Morrison, still aboard the USS Defiance, spoke up from his ship. You're withdrawing your invasion threat? Admiral Krixtal's response would be quoted in history books for centuries. Captain Morrison, your species has demonstrated that some worlds are too dangerous to conquer. We prefer to have humans as allies rather than enemies. The negotiations that followed established precedents that would reshape galactic politics. For the first time in Zephyrian history, a species had joined the Empire through strength rather than defeat. The peace treaty granted humanity unprecedented autonomy while providing access to alien technology and protection. Dr. Stone later wrote in his analysis of the events, "We prepared for the greatest war in human history, and instead achieved the greatest peace. Our violent nature, which many considered humanity's greatest weakness, became our greatest strength when facing an external threat." Admiral Turner addressed the United Earth Council in her final report. The aliens looked at our history and realized that conquering us would cost more than leaving us alone. Sometimes the best way to avoid a fight is to make it clear that you will never stop fighting. The Zephyrian Empire continued its expansion across the galaxy, but now with human military advisors attached to their fleets. Other species, seeing how humanity had earned respect through their reputation for endless warfare, began to reconsider their own approaches to dealing with the expanding empire. Captain Morrison was promoted to admiral and given command of the first joint human-alien exploration fleet. His mission, to find other worlds that might benefit from the protection that humanity could provide. Commander Park established the Institute for Interspecies Military History, where aliens from across the galaxy came to study human warfare tactics. Her most popular course was titled The Psychology of Species That Refuse to Surrender. Lieutenant Commander Bell became Earth's first ambassador to the Zephyrian High Command, where his expertise in psychological warfare proved invaluable in preventing conflicts before they started. 6 months after first contact, Admiral Crixtel visited Earth personally to sign the final alliance agreements. As his ship entered Earth orbit, he looked down at the blue world that had changed everything he thought he knew about conquest. War strategist Vexnor, he said to his aide, make a note in our expansion protocols. Before invading any world, we must first determine whether the species values death more than surrender. If they do, conquest may not be worth the cost. The galaxy had learned an important lesson about humanity. They were not a primitive species to be conquered, but a warrior race to be respected. The very qualities that had made humans seem violent and chaotic to other civilizations had ultimately earned them a place among the stars as equals. Years later, when other aggressive species threatened Zephyrian territory, they found themselves facing not just alien technology, but human determination. The combination proved unstoppable, and the galaxy learned that humanity's greatest export was not their technology or resources, but their absolute refusal to give up. The Zephyrian Empire had sought to conquer one more world, and instead had gained the most valuable ally in galactic history, a species that would fight until the end of time rather than surrender. In trying to make humanity kneel, they had instead taught the galaxy to stand.